Hi, I'm Kara.
And this is Laura. We are both community managers here at the Government Digital Service. If you're unfamiliar with GDS, we are part of the Cabinet Office. We sit at the center of government. We work on leading the digital transformation of government, and we support departments to do digital transformation. So we both work on communities of practice across government, and the fact that we have communities of practice is a testament in itself to the fact that government is a learning organization. The community of practice that I work on is user-centered design, and Laura works on the content community. And together that's around 3,500 people. And these are some of the reasons that we have communities of practice. So it's about sharing knowledge. It's about being a network rather than kind of keeping that knowledge really siloed. It's about sharing best practice. And it's about kind of growth mindset, for lack of a better term. It's talking about this continual learning, continually sharing best practice, continually learning from other people in government, and having this kind of peer network around you so that you're always learning from what other people are doing. Because we're working on very similar things, even though we're in different departments, and there's so much value in connecting up as one whole community.
So what we thought we'd do is just give you an overview of some of the activities that happen across GDS that speak to learning, and then we'll go into a bit more detail about communities of practice and what that looks like. So one of the things that's happening is there is an organisation which is tasked with looking after the digital profession, and it's creating the first national framework for job roles in digital across government, so that when I say service designer and you say service designer, we're talking about the same thing. They should get paid the same, and we should know what they're expected to know. Part of that process is also the GDS Academy, and the Academy trains people in Agile and digital technology project management. They recently had their 1,000th student on their Agile course, and had lots of cute biscuits. And we also have programs like the Data Science Accelerator, which is where people identify challenges that they want to work on in their department. They're matched up with a mentor, they get support for 3 months to work on that. And there's already, I can't remember how many millions, but they're showing that some of the ideas that are being developed in the Data Science Accelerator will be saving millions across government with the new ways of working. And GDS itself has a really strong learning culture. You probably have noticed on the walls, you can't move the post-it notes. There are so many show and tells. We work in the open, we share as we go, and that's something that's really central to working here. So that's just a sort of broad overview of some of the things that go on at GDS. So to speak about communities of practice in a bit more detail, we'll give you some examples of what that looks like, the work that we do. Sometimes it looks like this. This is 260 people across the day, an organising crew of 80, representation from 65 government organisations and 31 workshops. This is an event called the Cross-Government Content Conference, or ConCon, to give it a snappier title. It runs twice a year. It's happening in 2 weeks' time. It'll be fun. And sometimes communities of practice look like this, which is an online peer forum where people are able to ask questions of each other and help each other out.
Sometimes it looks like this. So we run user-centered design critique days. So it's about bringing together people working across user-centered design or other disciplines together to talk about work. At this last one, we had 27 government organizations and lots of different disciplines coming all together, and it's just a really great way for people to get feedback and to feel like they're not alone in what they're doing. Sometimes it looks like this. So we run design training. We run this every other month. Run it here in this room. And it kind of acts as an induction to the design community. So it's about kind of helping people that are new designers to government, people doing design work, or people who are working with designers, learn about how we do design in government and why we do user-centered design. And it introduces them to the community and all of the resources and support that are available. So now on to the challenges. We have a lot of challenges to talk through. The first one is government is not one single organization. So there are, I think, 20 different kind of main ministerial departments, lots of other government organizations, it's very complex. They all have different cultures, they all have different ways of working, and there's just lots of challenges around how do you get people to kind of even talk in a Google group if people can't have access to a Google group because their machines are locked down. So one thing that we're doing around this is kind of communities of interest and communities of mix between a community interest and community of action, and we're calling this a service community. So it's groups of people working across government departments that are working on similar user journeys. So for example, start a business. If you want to start a business, you kind of have to interact with lots of different government departments. So it's about bringing together those service teams that are working on that one user journey. But there's a lot of issues with bringing those people together. So there's a lot of issues around that kind of interoperability. And there's issues around, again, how do you find one tool that they can all use? And how do you even get people in this new type of community to show up to things and to agree to do things and to take actions when it may not feel necessarily as part of their day-to-day role. Another challenge is learning journeys. So I think as Laura mentioned, we have this kind of one framework of digital data and technology roles across government, and that was kind of published last year. So things like design are quite new as an established profession in government. So we're kind of working on figuring out, what are the gaps that people have in their learning, and it's constantly changing because government is fast-paced and working on services. So what are the learning needs, and how do people progress through that career? And the challenge around that is that we can't really design from the center. So GDS works on kind of guidance and support for departments, but we're not necessarily out working on a service. So we don't know what people working on service teams really need to know. So we need to work with the rest of government to learn what their needs are, so that we can design the right training. Another challenge is around this kind of siloed knowledge, and this kind of like repeated learning. So we have things like the service manual, which is a place for people working on designing and building services to find out kind of what they need to do in order to meet the standard. So that's things like learning how to do user research and kind of what elements to use if you're an interaction designer. And we have a kind of new design system that we're building, which will be launched soon, the GovUK design system, which is bringing all of this information and kind of design patterns and components together into one place. So that if you are working on a service, you can go see what's the pattern for asking someone for creating a password, so that you don't have to keep doing that over and over again. A lot of the work that people are doing on services is quite similar across the board, and there's lots of patterns across that work. But with this new design system, it's great that it's bringing it all together into one place that's easily accessible for people. But then there's this issue around contribution. So how do you get people to contribute to it? What does that look like? Who decides what goes into that? If people are working on things that aren't yet an established published pattern, how do people find out about that someone is working on it? How do you add research to that to back up that this pattern works? There's lots of kind of questions around what that process is for having this one central place for people to use.
Another one of the current challenges is that there tends to be an over-reliance on classroom-based training. I think because partly that's traditional in education, partly it's easy to count, so you think it's been done because you can say so many people have been on the thing. So we are experimenting with how you design and scale new forms of learning, but with that, the new challenge is how do we prove the impact with the new methods, because people are so very attached to the old methods, even though you also can't prove those are working. Somehow people imagine that they are, and it's very hard to convince them sometimes to try new things. Delivering at scale, sheer numbers that we're talking about, people that we need to work with and help and support, that is a challenge in itself. So one of the things we've been looking at is whether we can support other people to facilitate or train or run things themselves. And this was an experiment in Train the Trainer that showed that we got sort of 10 times more scale. If we had 25 people coming on a course, they would then work with 250 people. So we can show that the model allows us to increase our impact at scale, but that is a new challenge in terms of the quality of control of what people go to, variance of delivery, and that could be fine, but how do you manage all of that? Logistics when you're talking about spaces all over the UK. And this is classic. Obviously, that's a challenge now. We're trying to shift away from moving from measuring sort of service level impacts, numbers of people in training rooms, that sort of thing, to thinking about how you actually measure learning outcomes, which I know has come in the previous talk. The same challenge. It's the same challenge. It's not moved. We're still trying to figure out how to do that well. So the summary broadly is that we are thinking about how to go from being a doer, because we cannot deliver all this if we want to achieve the scale that we want, to being a multiplier. How can we create environments for people to flourish where we support them to do that, but we don't have to be there to do it all?
So that brings us to our question for you. So how do you know when you've learned something?